meeting. There's two meetings this evening. First one will be the Finance Committee meeting, and we will have a public participation for that meeting. There will be a meeting following that will be the council meeting, also with a public participation component. So questions pertaining to council at that time can be asked during public participation. At this time, I would ask the committee if there are any additions or changes to the agenda.
No. Move adoption of the agenda.
I would ask that we could add Pink's to correspondence portion.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, please.
Okay, with that, I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved by Mayor Little, second by Councillor Shukin. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, so this evening we do have a presentation by Kathleen Zimmerman, who is the former regional agrologist of BC Ministry of Agriculture. This evening she'll be speaking to us regarding the residential uses in the ALR, and she will be giving us a PowerPoint presentation. Kathleen?
So thank you very much for the invitation. This is an abbreviated version of a presentation I gave to your Agriculture Committee about 2 months ago. So a little bit about me. I grew up on a 10-acre farm in the interior. That's the North Thompson River in the background. My parents grew up on farms in Switzerland. I studied agriculture at both Guelph and UBC, and I've worked professionally in agriculture in BC for 20 years, about 15 of that with the Ministry of Agriculture. And I am a former Machosen resident, and I'm on the executive of the APRM. So I'm going to talk about 3 aspects of residential use in the ALR: the number and size of residences, fill that might be associated with those residences, and siting and home plate size, which are not legislation, but they are guidelines that the Ministry of Agriculture has published. So just to give you the context, the island region of the Agricultural Land Reserve contains just over 115,000 hectares, and that sounds like a lot, but if you look on the map, it's the green area that's in the ALR, and it's only 1.5% of the land base in this region, and the island is only 3% of the provincial ALR. So it's actually a pretty small area when you think about it, and globally, the arable land per person has declined by 50% in the last 50 years. So I often think that if we use the term endangered ecosystem to refer to the ALR and species at risk to refer to farmers, that would reverberate a lot more clearly with the public. And the ALC does have 3 pieces of legislation, an act and 2 regulations. So in terms of housing, this is the largest home that I know of in the ALR in the province. It's in Richmond on a 10-acre parcel, and the home is 22,300 square feet. It was listed for sale for just under $22 million in 2019. And as you can see, the assessed value is significantly less than $22 million. And this is one of the reasons why the ALC introduced legislation around house size. Because when you have this much investment in residential infrastructure, there will be no farmer in the future that will be able to pay $22 million for the 7.5 acres that's left at the back of the property. And you can also see that the blueberry field at the back of the property looks pretty sad. There's a lot of brown and empty patches compared to the very lush blueberry field on the right-hand side, which is on the neighboring property. So I would argue that agriculture is not a priority on this property. So in response, the ALC came out with new legislation at the end of 21. You are now allowed 1 principal residence to a maximum of 500 square meters of total floor area, and you may have a secondary suite in that residence. You're allowed 1 additional residence, and the size varies depending on the size of the property. If you want a 3rd residence, you have to submit a non-adhering residential use application to the ALC. And the ALC must not grant permission unless that additional third or fourth or more residence is necessary for farm use. And they have actually approved these types of applications. If you go to the application portal section of their website, you can search by type of application. And since about halfway through 2019, the ALC has approved 233 of these non-adhering residential use applications throughout the province. In addition, the ALC, when they came up with these new house size limits, has said if local governments choose, they can make their bylaws more restrictive. So they can make the maximum total floor area of the principal residence less than 500 meters squared if they choose. Or they can require a minimum lot size for the additional residence, or they can even outright prohibit the additional residence. What you currently have in your land use bylaw, there's 2 zones that cover the ALR. The AG zone allows 1 dwelling unit with a secondary suite, and if the property is assessed as a farm and greater than 4 hectares, you can have a mobile home of a maximum of 70 meters squared for farm employees working on that farm. In the AG1 zone, it just says you can have 1 dwelling unit with a secondary suite. In addition to the new house size requirements, the ALC has some fill requirements for housing. If you're building or maintaining the principal residence and the total area that's going to be filled or has soil removed is more than 1,000 square meters, you must submit a notice of intent. If you're doing any soil removal or fill for the additional residence, you automatically have to submit a notice of intent. And in both cases, the notice of intent must be submitted at least 60 days in advance, and the local government cannot issue a building permit until it's approved. So again, in terms of siting and home plates, there's no legislation, but there are guidelines in the Ministry of Agriculture's Guide for Bylaw Development in Farming Areas. And what they recommend is a maximum 50-meter setback for the dwellings from the frontage road, and setting a maximum home plate size. So this would be an area where you put all of your residential uses, your carport, your swimming pool, your tennis court, your gardens, etc. And as an example, this is an illustration from Maple Ridge. They also have a fair number of smaller sized lots in their ALR, and they picked 0.2 of a hectare as their home plate size. And I wanted to give you a couple of examples in Metchosin as to why it would be useful to have not only residential size limits, but also siting and home plate restrictions. And these properties are anonymous. They're just meant to be illustrations. So this particular property is just over 10 acres. It had farm status in 21. It was sold in November of 2020. A home and a winding driveway were built in the fall of 2022. And this property no longer has farm status. The second property is just under 3 acres. It also had farm status in 2021. The farm lease was canceled. A home and quite a bit of fill were brought in so the house could be raised for a better view in the fall of 2022 again, and it too no longer has farm status. So on just 2 properties in the last 12 months, with no home plate or setback requirements, Metchosin has potentially lost 13 acres of productive farmland. And why this matters, if you have housing restrictions, it will help eliminate any restrictions on future agricultural activities on that lot. It directs the largest homes to the residentially zoned areas, which is where I would argue they should be. It minimizes the impact of residential uses on neighboring farms, i.e. the more non-farmers you have in an area, the more potential for complaints about farm practices like dust, odor, and noise. And it minimizes the impact of the residential use on the cost of the farmland, as per the Richmond example. And it minimizes the loss and fragmentation of farmland due to residential uses, which is what we just saw in those two properties. So overall, I would recommend that the chosen council consider adding a home plate and residential setbacks to your land use bylaw, and consider adding the ALC house size requirements, just so that it's there's more symmetry between the land use bylaw and provincial legislation. This doesn't force owners to farm their land, but it does protect the land base for future farmers. So thank you very much for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kathleen. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Gray.
Thanks very much. That's pretty clear information. I wonder, just at the very beginning, you mentioned that the Agricultural Land Commission allows one principal residence, quite a large one at that, and a secondary suite. And then are the others additional to the secondary suite, or?
Yes. So the secondary suite is in the principal residence, and it has to be part of that 5,000 plus square feet, 500 meters squared total floor area.
Very good.
So you could, according to them, you could have the principal residence with a secondary suite and the additional residence. So in effect, you could have 3 dwelling spaces in the ALR. And they've dropped any requirement for the additional residence to be for a farm worker or a family member, which they used to have.
The secondary residence.
Yes, in the additional residence.
The third residence does require
Must
something to do
be
with
for a farm
use.
worker.
Right. My other question was, does the Agricultural Land Commission have the staff to regulate this and enforce their rules where they exist?
They do have enforcement staff. I'm sorry, I don't have their most recent annual report in front of me. They're obviously stretched thin, right? I think they have about maybe half a dozen staff for the entire province, and each of them is assigned one of the regions. So I know they have a lot of files on their desk, but they do have staff. But this is, if it was in your bylaw, this is the kind of thing that the chosen could use your bylaw enforcement staff to deal with as well before it has to get to the ALC.
Thank you.
Councillor Schuppen.
Thanks very much, Kathleen, and yeah, very much appreciate your work with the ADRN. You've helped a lot of us understand a lot of technical issues over the years, so thank you very much. Without kind of knowing how to fully frame this question, but just want to throw something out at you. What are there tax implications at the local level as well? Are there not? Like, if you build a house on ALR land, you had farm status, and you maxed out the house area, but then you also brought the land to $1,000 an acre in terms of assessed value. Like, is that a consideration as well in this situation? Or?
I'm not sure I've understood the question.
Sorry, I said it was ill-formed, but yeah. Let me rethink it. If I can think of it better, I'll maybe email you the question.
Okay.
But I was one other follow-up though. I was going to ask about something along the lines that Councillor Gray had in terms of enforcement, but you've answered the question. If it's in our land use bylaw, it is enforceable by the district. So, and the enforcement, not so much the enforcement, but the standard is you move toward it as you go through the permitting process. To build your house, like if we were to establish a home plate base, like it must conform, and you would find that out during the permit.
Right, yes, when someone submitted the building permit, they should also be submitting the home plate drawing to show where all the buildings would be situated on the property, if you chose to adopt a home plate.
Mary.
Yeah, thank you for that presentation, very informative. I was just wondering, are there other jurisdictions in BC? And I was thinking Delta in the Richmond area. Are there other municipalities that have very good guidelines regarding siting and home plates and that you can think of?
I don't know who has adopted. if you did a search home plate, BC local government, I know Chilliwack has them, I know Maple Ridge has them. And I picked Maple Ridge because I thought it was the most comparable to Machosen.
Okay.
Chilliwack has much larger farms, like large dairy farms, large greenhouses. But if that was important, I could do a quick search and send the information to Tina.
Yeah, that would be great.
Send out to you.
Yeah, that would be great. Then we can also look at their bylaws as well and see what they have in there.
Yeah, it'd be good to know if there's any on the island as well.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Gray?
Yeah. Well, then just on one particular item that I guess would fall to the commission's enforcement, this notice of intent, is that submitted to the commission then?
It is.
And then they are the ones who make a decision on that if it...
Correct. But I believe when it gets submitted to the commission, there's a process for informing the local government that it has been submitted. So that you would know that they were within that 60-day period of the commission getting back to the applicant.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you. And sorry, I forgot to make a plug. I worked with agriculture advisory committees, Richmond, Delta, Surrey, and Metro Vancouver when I worked with the ministry. And they're such a valuable resource. It was so lovely to be able to talk to yours. So I just wanted to encourage you to take real advantage of this great agricultural knowledge you have in the community and send them things like ALR applications and bylaws and OCP changes that might impact agriculture, just to get all the great feedback from these wonderful volunteers.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now we move on to public participation. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak at public participation? And if so, state your name and the street in which you live.
Patty Whitehouse, Rocky Point Road. First, to express my appreciation to Catherine for a very interesting and stimulating presentation. And then to thank you, Councillor Donaldson, for moving your mic closer to you. I can hear you so much better tonight, and I do so appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else? We have a big crowd tonight.
Chris Andywater, William Head Road. I think the APRM was mistaken when they were talking about that 10 or 11 acre piece that has a new driveway. That's probably the one on Rock Point Road, right? And I hate that, and it's still in the land reserve. It still has farm status. So that's the latest.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, good evening. My name is Ellen Frisch. I live down on Perry Crossroad. Just a few comments in response to the presentation that we just saw. I do regulatory planning with the ALC and landowners for a living. I want to clarify a couple of statements that were made. First of all, no farm status does not equal loss of productive farm land. So those are two completely different things, and I want to make that clear because the presentation appeared to combine those things. I think that if you're considering sizing and home plate limitations, there's some really interesting implications there by doing some examinations of the current bylaw, because there's already significant setback from sides, front, and rear. And in considering home plate, it's really targeting residential. So if you've got a farm and you're trying, and you still are a farm use, or you have farm status, you can still build your barn, your loafing shed, whatever, anywhere on the property. It's not restricted to that home plate. So potentially some of the target that this is trying to achieve may not necessarily hit it. The other thing I might suggest, and I don't know if it happens now, is when the plan checker gets applications for properties in the ALC, I know we just talked about bylaws and policing this. What I've seen in working with Abbotsford, Mission, Richmond, is they have a very strong plan checking process. So they want to see that that landowner has made that application to the ALC, They also check to make sure that the size of the house, for example, that's proposed meets the ALC requirements. And that's one of the biggest gaps, is that connection between what the ALC says and what the bylaw says. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about one thing trumping the other, because as you heard tonight, the municipality can be more restrictive than the ALC. So I do see a lot of people that, for example, see that you can have 2 homes in certain circumstances, but the bylaw doesn't allow for 2 homes. So there's some room there to be very clear in how those 2 things work together. And it can help, rather than introducing it in the bylaw, have a policy process through your plan checker, and then it takes it off the plate of your bylaw officers if that's a resource issue. So just some thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Tamara Ballard, Blue resident. I have a letter that was written by the property owner, property A, of the presentation tonight, that I'm going to read on their behalf. Just to be clear, these are their words, not mine. I would appreciate your attention as I address some specific comments that have come to my attention. It is important to me to provide accurate information and clarify any misconceptions that have arisen regarding the construction project of 4481 Rocky Point Road. Firstly, I would like to address a completely inadequate claim that the property has been removed from the Agricultural Land Reserve, the ALR, and will not be farmed. This is far from the truth. On the contrary, our plan is to increase agricultural production to 2 crops per year and obtain organic certification. Additionally, we aim to incorporate small-scale vegetable cultivation. Preserving agricultural character of the land is of utmost importance to me. I have also heard the term McMansion being associated with the building size. It is important to note that the maximum size of the house is determined by the regulations set forth by the ALR and/or Metchosin bylaw. Despite these regulations allowing for modest-sized structures, my intention is to construct a home that is significantly smaller than the maximum allowable size. If you have any concerns regarding house size, I would recommend engaging with the ALR or Metchosin Council to address this matter. Furthermore, I feel compelled to respond to comments suggesting discrimination due to being new to Metchosin. Although I believe such remarks should not be given credence, I have encountered them frequently. Allow me to provide a quick background to dispel any doubts. I was actually born and
Point of
raised...
order. Just a moment. I don't think that the presentation talked about. I don't think the presentation talked about new people in the community. I think we're getting a little off focus here. We're
Okay, I will skip that part.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you could just
Yeah.
speak to
Okay.
what was presented tonight and anything else on the agenda, I think that would be better. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so the driveway was mentioned, correct? Okay. So now let's address the questions about the winding driveway and the placement of the house further back from the road. Years of using the field as a parking lot has resulted in compacted soil, affecting drainage and causing water to pool near Rocky Point Road. Moreover, Metchosin has implemented Step 3 of the Building Code, which necessitates the hiring of an energy advisor. Based on their recommendations, the chosen location for the house was determined. As for the winding driveway, it was a requirement imposed by the fire department to ensure adequate space for a 40-foot truck turnaround. Please understand that these factors are beyond my control. I'll just read this last part. It says, in conclusion, I thank you for your patience and attentiveness. It is my hope that by addressing these specific comments, which I wasn't allowed, I have been able to provide the necessary clarity and any concerns. Together, let us work towards a harmonious and prosperous community that honors our shared values while respecting individual aspirations. Thank you for your time.
And Ms. Ballard, do you have an author to that letter?
I do, but since Kathleen said that it was anonymous,
Okay, fair enough.
so,
Yeah.
okay.
So people are welcome to submit letters to us and emails, and contact us as well by phone, other correspondence, anytime. Marilyn?
Yeah, I don't know Kathleen. I met Kathleen this evening. I think what Kathleen was trying to just exemplify what can happen, and that there are cases that she saw. She wasn't outing anybody. She didn't name the address as you had named the address, or the name. I think it was just meant to be examples of what could happen, and maybe she should have used something in Chilliwack or whatever. But we can learn from this experiment, or from this. From this meeting, but I don't think that Kathleen meant to upset anybody by her comments. It was an example. It was a plea to use all the tools in our toolkit available so that we can preserve land, preserve farming, if that is the intent.
So the intent of inviting Kathleen this evening, I took it upon myself to do that as a council liaison for the Ag Committee, because the presentation, which was 45 minutes long and very detailed, pertained to a lot of the concerns that we do hear from the residents of this community, both in these meetings, through letters, and not just in the last 6 months. So it's really important for all of us to be educated and to have this information, which is why we had a presentation under 10 minutes, and I appreciate Ms. Zimmerman coming this evening. Councillor Shukin, do you have something to say? No? Okay. So we'll move on to, if there's no other public participation, we'll move on to the next part of the agenda. Councillor Gray, yes?
Can I just ask, will you bring that back to the Ag Committee, or how will that issue come back to our table? You have a motion this evening.
We have an Ag Committee meeting this week, and these are some of the things that they will likely be discussing in regards to their ag plan. We've already, as a council, are going to be from time to time referring maybe new bills or site visits like we do with the other advisory committees.
Super. I'm just thinking maybe if it would be appropriate to make a motion for a staff report on municipal regulatory approach to help out in the situation, just to get some more detail from the staff. I'd be ready to make that motion if this is the right time. Or if you want to bring it back to that committee first, that's fine with me too.
Now's a good time to do that, if you like, yes?
Sure, well, I'll just make a motion then to request the staff report on municipal regulatory approach to assist the Agricultural Land Commission and Machosa in meeting the ALR mandates.
To explore home plates.
There were three: the home plate, the residential setback, and the LC house size requirements. I'd just like to learn what would be required to do that, how they, sounds like they mesh together well. We heard from the second person public participation. It may be that some of this is covered already and some of it we would need to enact new, and I think just a bit more information on that would be helpful to all of us.
I would second that.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Gray and seconded by Councillor Shukin. Discussion? Marilyn?
So would this be the planner that you were suggesting to bring back the report? She would be the most experienced and knowledgeable, I would think.
Yeah, I'll leave that to the CEO, but that sounds like a good idea.
Any other discussion? I call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so we turn to page 9. This is the adoption of the minutes for the Special Finance Committee meeting, which was a budget meeting February 28th. And I have a motion to move. Moved by Mayor Little, second by Councillor Epp. Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And page 13, adoption of the minutes for the Finance Committee of May 1st.
So moved. Move adoption.
Moved by Councillor Shukin, second by Mayor Little. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And page 17, receipt of the minutes for the Agriculture Advisory Select Committee meeting of May 10th, 2023.
Move receipt.
Moved by Councillor Epp, seconded by Councillor Gray. Councillor Schuken?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I have one correction, and it's just under public participation where first sentence after Sasha Kuchek's comments, it's stated as young agrarians, and it's young agrarians, and it should be capitalized. And I believe these notes were done by the Ag Committee, so they're forgiven for being a little.
We're rotating. We're starting with the new people at the table. So, a bit of education. Thank you. Mayor Little.
Yeah, I also am very pleased to see the Machosen agricultural plan on the agenda, so that's on the way. So that's wonderful news.
Yes. And Councillor Gray.
And yeah, that is great news. I also want to just mention how effective I think that Machosen grown map in the Machosen Muse was, and so well done to the committee for getting that out there. I did have a question about the agriculture plan, and just in terms of process, will that come back to council in terms of reference, that sort of thing to look at for our review or goals or objectives, or what's the plan there? What would you like to do?
Yeah, it is, the first steps will be, there is a subcommittee that will be working on this. The farmers, of course, as you know, are very busy with haying and putting our crops right now. So we do have a meeting this week, but we'll probably take the summer, but we'll be out in the fields in the summer and then reconvene. But the subcommittee will be meeting through the summer and hopefully have something ready in the fall to come back to council for next steps.
Super. And I just thinking about that email that I sent you about the human-wildlife conflict, and we had this terrible loss of sheep in the last little while, and the troubles with the cougars, and I just think it would be great to get some advice on that issue, generally speaking, in terms of best practices and thinking about the biodiversity we want to support, but also we want to support our farmers. So I think the agriculture committee maybe they're just the right group to take a look at that for us.
Yes, there's been at the table a number of meetings now that various predators that they've been facing in past years.
Thank you.
Any other comments on these minutes? So do we have a...
Take the vote.
Okay, so take a vote. Yes, thanks. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, so then on page 21, business arising. So these are the grant and aids that we discussed at a previous meeting, May 1st. So on May 1st, the Finance Committee meeting, we received the applications for 8 agencies for the 2023 Grant and Aid Program. And the committee, I suspect you've all read your agendas now and considered the various requests that are sitting before us here and the recommendations that we need to consider for funding amounts for each one. Okay, so I'm going to open up to the table. Councillor Gray, comments?
Sure. Well, if you'd like some motions, I'll make a motion that we grant the capital bike the $500 requested. It was an impressive presentation they gave us the other day, and I really think that it warrants our support for having young people getting active on bicycles and learning about road safety.
I'll second it.
So do you want to do this like line by line, or?
We could do.
Okay.
Whatever you're the chair, whatever you think is best.
Okay. I think what I've seen done with grant and aid discussions in the past is instead of voting on each one individually, is we consider the amount for each one, and then see what the total is, and then vote on them as a collective. Does that seem reasonable? Yeah, Councillor Schuken?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I actually like the idea of going through them individually and voting as Councillor Gray has initiated.
Okay. So we have $5,000 total, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Councillor Gray. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I did a question to you. Do we, or are we expected to provide all the money to the seed?
No.
is there precedent for not giving the whole amount?
Correct. So we've read the policy. There's we have a policy, but we don't have a matrix to actually work by. So I went in the past 10 years of the minutes to look at the results of each of the grant aids. I've also spoken to 2 past councillors of the past term, and one of them being the past chair, which was Councillor McKinnon, to discuss different ways of actually doing this and what would be the criteria. One of the big ones was, did the person or the organization appear? Like, did they actually come and do a presentation, or did they just submit a package? How fulsome was the package? Did it include everything that was asked for in the application? How does it benefit the residents of this community? And how does it benefit the community as a whole? So those are some things to think about. And I think going forward, next time we need to create a bit of a matrix to go by so that it's not so loose, and tie that in with our policy. The one thing that did stand out in the policy for me was those who are awarded $1,000 or more from the previous year do need or required to give a report. And I have checked with staff and they have done so. So that's always good merits for them if they come back the following year. So no, we don't have to give away the whole $5,000. There may be other groups later in the year that might need something or whatever, I'm not really sure. Or it gets rolled over again back into the budget for the following year. Okay. Any other questions on that process? Okay, so we're looking at the capital bike. They've asked for 500. There's any thoughts that that's an allotment we would consider. Okay, so let's go on to the next one for IACTI. They're asking for 250.
Councillor Dodson,
Yes.
I think we have a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded.
Okay. So we are going to do line by line and
I would be supportive of doing that
okay.
myself, but I mean, it's up to the rest of the committee, I guess. But I think we do have a motion on the floor that we have.
Yep, okay, let's do that, and I'll do my best to keep track that we don't go over the 5,000 before we get to the bottom of the list. That's the thing, right? Okay. Mayor Little.
Just call the vote then.
Yeah, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, so 500 for capital bike, and IACTI $250.
Councillor Donaldson, I would move that we provide IACTI with $250 as a grant aid.
Okay, second by Mayor Little. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Wanafuka Performing Arts for $300.
I would make a motion to provide $300 for the Wonderful Arts Center Society.
Motion by Mayor Little, second by Councillor Epp. Any comments? Okay, call the question. All in favor? So it's $300. Machosen Museum Society, $800 for a computer.
I'd move $800 to the Museum Society for a computer.
I would second.
Okay, comments?
I just wanted to comment that they've got $30,000 in their account. Usually societies don't hold money, so they have the money to be able to, I would have liked if they had presented here, I would have asked them the question why they're holding on to $30,000 and not spending it on a computer that they desperately need. So I wish, does anybody have any
Well, I have a comment
information?
to that. I just got off the ferry this afternoon after being in the AGM in Salt Spring for the last 2 days, and that was something that actually had come up there as well with grant monies going towards computers for groups, and in talking with the staff there that I was meeting with, some of the practices that, and I've experienced this in groups in the Greater Victoria area as well, that oftentimes when it's to do with treasury in nonprofit groups, people will either use Excel spreadsheets or and save it to flash drives and use their personal computers or whatever other device. So the experience or the feedback I got back from the staff I was working with on Salt Spring Island was that the grant money generally doesn't go towards things like a computer for a small nonprofit. It would go towards projects, that sort of thing. So that was just some information that I received in the last 24 hours, but also previously. Councillor Shukin, you have a comment?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I did get a chance to talk to Museum Society president today, and I did ask that very question about the use of a computer versus just using a spreadsheet and emailing the results around. They seem pretty convinced that the computer is of value to them, and they mentioned getting some software, some accounting software that they can use. So it's not for me to say how the Museum Society should run itself. The one other thing I would note is that the computer they're projecting will cost, I think it was $1,100, so they are contributing some to it. I'm open to supporting it this amount or some other amount that the committee will decide. So, thank you.
Any other comments about this amount or another amount or no amount? I would suggest not the full amount. I don't support the $800.
Okay. I'm sorry to mention this. We do have a motion on the floor, though. So.
Well, we're having a discussion though.
Yeah,
the
for
motion
sure. Yeah.
Second, right?
Yeah. I think the motion is for $800. So if we're gonna, we can defeat it and start.
Sure.
Again, but yeah.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. Opposed? Motion carried. Okay. And for the Machosen Preschool Society, $1,500. Motion. Councillor Epp.
I'll make a motion to provide the $1,500 to the Preschool Society.
Okay.
I will second.
Okay. Motion by Councillor Epp, second by Councillor Shukin. Any comments, questions? Just going
through the package again, they seem to be putting the money to good use. It is for maintenance, but $1,500 doesn't go all that far, so I think it's money well spent.
Okay, so call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Are you keeping the total? Okay, so Prince Edward branch of the Royal Canadian Legion are asking for $350 to support their staff at an event this fall for volunteers.
So I'll make a motion for $350 towards the Prince Edward Island branch.
Okay, motion by Mayor Little, second by Councillor Gray. Any comments? Discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
I think we're at 3,700. I think.
No. Okay.
Yep.
And the Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission requesting $3,000 for their commission. This is a non-profit organization.
Councillor Donaldson, if I could just make a comment. I believe in the past, the grant and aid from it shows it's been around $1,500. And, you know, in hearing anecdotal stories about the film work that is done in that shows, and I do see that there are benefits that go to the broader community. I'm unclear about exactly how the district itself benefits financially, but there clearly are some benefits that are spread throughout the community. So I'm willing to support. I'm unwilling, though, to give them the full amount of $3,000, and I might suggest that $1,500 is more along the lines of where we're going.
The only problem is 13.
Oh.
Marilyn?
So we've got $1,300 left. Had we done it the other way, we would have been able to jiggle. So maybe next year we can go back to the previous format. But so what we've got left is $1,300. But you're right. In the past we've given them $1,500. They do bring economic benefit to the community. And there's the pink as well. I did ask some specific questions from Ms. Gilbert, and she came back. The line item in relation to the commissioner was a salary, one salary, so the board members are not compensated, and I think they do some really good work. But we only have $1,300 now, so.
Okay, so motion for $1,300. Do we have this?
Sure. I would make a motion that we provide the Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission a grant in aid of $1,350.
Okay. And motion by Councillor Shukin, second. Councillor Ash, seconds. Any other comments? Councillor Ash.
I think the $50 puts us over.
Oh. Okay. Can I revise that motion to,
yes.
What is it we have left? $1,300. $1,300. Ms. Hanson. Thank you.
Okay. So call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thanks very much.
So there's one group.
I just can't add.
Okay, so we have one group left on our list. Actually, they were the first one. I apologize for missing the first one there. The African Heritage Association of Vancouver Island had requested $2,750. They weren't here for their presentation. They did have a full package, and they're new. I've never heard of them before. So we no longer have funds because we just used the $5,000 grants. Councillor Abb.
I think I'd hope that they would possibly come back in the future, and so we could learn a little bit more about them. I don't know that, I'm not familiar with them either. I've never heard of it, even though they say they have several members in the chosen, but it would be nice to hear from them.
Yeah, it would be. You're right. And I want to thank all the people that did apply, because there's a lot of work that goes into these packages, and it's a lot of paper just for the 8 groups that we did have. A lot of time, there's finances, presentations, lots of contact information they put on there as well. So, Councillor Gray.
Yeah, and just about the African Heritage Association of Vancouver Island, which I don't know either, I think their goals are laudable. The difficulty I had was going through the proposal. There were inconsistencies in some of the details, and without the opportunity to speak with them directly, it left me less keen on that particular application. And all the other ones that we got, we did hear from them and know the details of what they're up to. So that makes a big difference for me.
We didn't hear, sorry. The Museum Society wasn't here, right?
Yeah, we got the details from them, and they're clear for what they were, and then hearing that Councillor Shuka spoke to the president today helps too.
Okay. Okay, so now if we move on to page 25, under reports, it's the councillor's update. Sorry, 25 is the next one. Okay, so as the representative that sits on the board for the West Shore Parks and Recreation, I'm pleased to say that the skateboard park is up and running. May 13th was the grand opening. It was a very hot day, very well used. So now it's in full use, and their plan already has, they have a skate park camp that's coming up. This will be a half-day camp for 12 to 14-year-olds. They're hoping to have more of these sorts of things through the year. It's not specific to young people. There were actually quite a few adults there the day that they had the opening. So this particular camp will be for first-time and beginner skateboarders. There will be a certified skateboarding instructor helping out and teaching the basics, the warming up and the stretching of the body to get it ready for the physical aspect of this. learning about the foot placement and the balance, push, the turn and stop, how to fall. It's always important to how to fall safely. So those are some things that are happening with that particular entity. It's a new activity. I encourage everybody to go down and have a look. It's a pretty dynamic place. Just as a spectator, it's not something I would ever do, but it certainly is a lot of fun. There was a young lady there with roller skates, and the elbows and the knees were all covered, and still wearing shorts. There were a lot of crashes, but nobody got themselves hurt badly, just some scrapes. This summer, the Canadian Lawn Bowling Championship will be in the lower field behind the Q Centre. And the Agricultural Committee, as I said earlier, they formed a subcommittee to work on the contents of an ag plan, and we'll see what happens come fall. Farmers Market is quite a hub of activity since the day they opened, which was Mother's Day in May. Every weekend it is just so full of people. All the shelters are built and being used now, just waiting for the tin roof to go on. That was quite a collaborative effort by some pretty dynamic volunteers, not just the farmers market people, but certainly other people that kind of come and go and step up and help at a moment's notice. It is an asset to the property, I have to say. It'll be great for when those big winds come and keep out of the elements. I believe the second Sunday, people were still hanging on to their tents because we weren't allowed to use they weren't allowed to use the shelters yet. So this will be welcome to have. The community garden over on the school grounds, we're still working on eradicating, or at least removing the top parts of the broom. We've had the work release fellows out, and they finished the job that a few of us volunteers were doing, and now we need to dig down and get some roots out and assess the soil and see where that takes us. I did put an article into the news looking for interested parties, and I'm getting emails consistently. Actually, I haven't been in my office, but I've gotten at least 6 in the last week, so this is all good stuff that's happening. Royal Roads University Farm had an event recently. I won't give all the details because it's on the council. It's in the council agenda as well. But it's called Vision in Bloom, and it consists of a giving garden. There will be a new market garden and an indigenous medicine garden. And this particular garden last year grew 1,000 pounds worth of food that went to food insecure people in our communities. So this is the purpose of this event was there was a big presentation, but I won't elaborate. I'll leave that to our mayor in her report because she's got more details on that. Greater Victoria Public Library, another board that I sit on. I had the privilege of going on a tour of 6 libraries, and each one is I encourage everybody to do this. They're all so very different in their design and in their development of how they're changing things for accessibility. They're doing away with the tall shelving. This is very expensive, so they're doing it over time. They're now on wheels with brakes, and they're lower so that people in wheelchairs or walkers can access them. As the James Bay one had CBC come in and do an expose on a reading, and they moved everything out of the way. You couldn't even tell. So it was pretty good use of space. So these are just some of the things that your tax dollars are going to pay. Both the West Shore Parks Recreation Society and the Greater Victoria Public Library are incredibly dynamic entities. I've really enjoyed working with them. They all love their jobs, and they're super keen on customer service. When you go into a nice, cool library, because the heat's coming, it's a very welcoming and safe place. We were on the day that we were touring. It was raining. We were in the Nellie McClung Library, which is one of the older ones, and there was a group of teenagers just hanging out with friends. There was board games. There was they were quiet, and it was just a place to go that was safe before parents came to collect them, and that was really cool. Some other stuff that I was involved with was the Sarah Beckett Memorial Run. Mayor Little and Councillor Shukin joined me on May 13th, and it was a lot of fun. It was also a very hot day, but we were helping safely get the participants across an incredibly busy intersection of Alouette and Langford Lake Road, it's called. Councillor Shukin.
I was quite pleased that we were given a meaningful job that day, because often you go there and you're standing there in the red vest, but we were given a meaningful job. So thank you for mobilizing us.
Yes, no, it was great fun. And I'm really happy that we had high-vis vests on, because people were pretty speedy going through there. It was a trail that came out across a road, but there was also an intersection, so we had to kind of divert them to go across the crosswalk, because that's the proper thing to do, not just to jaywalk. But people would come up pretty quick through some of those small, cramped kind of roads there. But no, it was a good day. There was good participation. There was live band playing, and people were warming up before they went out on their walks, rides. We saw the reserves there, the police reserves, and people walking dogs, all sorts of people, and lots of runners as well. Another exciting tour that I did was a tour of Westmont Montessori School. And now, 25 years ago, when my kids could have gone there, it was just like portables. It was so small, and now it's just grown into this fabulous. It was fabulous then, but it's Mayor Little and I were able to take this in, and I left there thinking I would love to be a kid again. It was so peaceful. As soon as you go indoors, I mean, it was a gorgeous day like today. But there was 2 baby grand pianos in the foyer that would be played at any time that the children were not maybe doing something else. But every one of the rooms was sized to the age of, or not the age, because there was like 3 grades to a classroom, say. So there was no age segregation, which was great, because children learn from each other. There were lots of natural light. The desks, door handles, were sized for them. They have like life skill rooms, which are like kitchens, and they do, they learn about putting on laundry and doing dishes and doing some cooking and that. And they also have, every classroom has a door that goes out into the yard. All the lights were off because there was lots of light coming in, and there was little lamps, but they were all quiet. Like they were really engaged with what was going on. And then the teens, the first thing they do is they have phys ed when they arrive to school. So they get all the bugs out, get woken up, and then they start on the agenda and on with the day. It was some really, really positive, and the things that they're doing, there's so many wonderful things. So it was great. It was it's a happening place for education. Very, very positive. Okay, that's all I have for my councillor's report. Councillor Gray.
I just want to say about the farmers market, like, wow, that place is looking so cool, and thanks to all the volunteers who worked on it.
Yeah, it's lots of new vendors this year, and lots of
Very nice.
the mainstays are still there as well.
Councillor Dawson, I think really Councillor Gray should make mention to the names of what we've been seeing there. Karen Hoffman and Ollie have really put in mammoth efforts, and then Mike Pretty and other volunteers have really been involved, and the farmers market has raised funds for these stalls for I think 12 to 15 years, and they haven't asked for any money from the municipality, so it's quite an asset, and they really, you're right, they should be congratulated.
Yeah, they're a good group.
And I note that Jackie Anderson's with us tonight, and I've talked to her a few times about the amount of work that's been done, and just, echoing what you're both saying. So,
Okay, so on page 25, we have a letter to Mayor Little about this is the Growing Community Fund. Yes, the 2.4 million.
That's right.
Okay.
did you want me to speak to this?
Yes, I would appreciate if you would.
Yeah. And so in March, in middle of March, the announcement was made that Metchosin was given 2.4 million approximately in the Growing Communities Fund, which we gratefully accepted. They've got some guidelines here on page 26 of the package, as well as some contingencies and guidelines starting on page 29. So the reason why this was asked to be put on your agenda was just to start talking about this.
Okay.
We're not going to make any big decisions tonight, but what staff and what I'd like to hear is just some of your ideas. Where can this money, we don't have to spend it all at once, and we shouldn't spend it all at once, but certainly I would like to have some ideas. And with the idea that maybe this would go forward to a planning portfolio in the fall when we're discussing our strategic planning. Okay, that's okay?
Sure, yeah, when I was reading through this, I see we have 5 years is the timeline to invest this money into our community. And there have been lots of discussions through the budgeting process. One of them was money allotted for a feasibility study for the fire hall replacement. So that was one that was discussed, and something that we need to consider going forward for sure. We also, like you say, in the strategic plan, talked about a transportation action plan, those sorts of things, what would include roadside trails, that sort of thing. So, water, I see that's another infrastructure that's in here, and those are some considerations we might want to think about for the Metchosin School. So we have some signage put up now with some water concerns there from time to time. I'm sure other people at the table have some comments. Committee, any ideas? Councillor?
Yeah, I've been making a list ever since we got that grant. Oops, I just lost it. I know it's here. I should have written it down.
Do you want me to go while you?
Yes, please, Marilyn.
Yeah. So the Weir Beach stairs, where we were going to consider as one of the project, and that work is starting to go on one of the committees. Certainly, we've also got other monies. We can remember that we still have, I think it's 700 or so left in the COVID Restart grant that we could use, like for rejigging the council chambers here. The Bilston Creek management, the hydrologist for that would be really great. Trails and Swales project that people have been talking about as well. It would be great to get some seed money for that. Those are a few ideas.
Maybe a roadside trail for the school, or Hans August.
Yeah,
that might be something.
All right, we find this. So yes, I did have the Hans Halverson Trail on the list, and of course the fire hall. I think that the bulk of the money should go toward the new fire hall. As far as the school, potentially to enlarge the parking lot, so that seems to be an issue these days. Possibly an outdoor washroom and better lighting around the school. The other thing would be to help the community garden. Road safety initiatives, we still have quite a few things we need to do to try to make the roads safer. A stair lift on the MACA side of the school, which is needed for accessibility to the upper level, which is really in use a lot by various different groups and individuals, and they rent that out. Another one would be, excuse me, the Flush Road, whatever we decide to do there. A potential fence to divide the buffer land from Langford. And another one would be a contracted employee that could act as a part-time in a dual role of an assistant for the fire chief, as well as to take on some of the management responsibilities of the school.
I've written down some things there. Councillor Shukin.
Thanks very much, Councillor Donaldson, and excellent list from Councillor Graham. I hate to be uncreative about this, but my line of sight when I began to understand the parameters of the fund was the fire hall. And particularly after reading all the reports that Chief Dunlop had provided for us, it just seems like it is long overdue. And that would be my view, but others would disagree, and that's fine. But that's my uncreative sort of beeline for funding.
Councillor Grady, I guess.
Yeah, I have to admit, I read the letter through before, and I thought, oh wow, this is a great opportunity. There's all kinds of money here and all kinds of ideas. And I got, I think, to the second or the third page, and I hit this comment about that we have to provide an annual report identifying how the work relates to housing needs. And I went back to the beginning of the letter. I thought, holy crow, principal objective of the, and of course it's in the name, Growing Community Fund, is to increase the local housing supply with investments in community infrastructure and amenities. And then looking at some other materials which we received today, and we'll talk about later in council, this money's been given to us in order to allow for increased density, it looks like in Metchosin. And so, I look at that and go, wait a minute, we're not really that keen on increasing density in Metchosin. What could we do with this money that would support the requirements of the fund and meet the principal objectives? So I guess I'm thinking about, now we can talk about it in our next meeting, but Metchosin's been named as one of the communities that may well be required to increase density in order to satisfy the provincial government's housing plans. With words like the province is prepared to override municipalities and neighborhood groups opposed to density in order to get new housing units. And then this is the seed money to get you ready. And I'm not that keen on increasing density in Metchosin, to be honest. In fact, I think we should be working backwards to the province about the regional growth strategy and that. So the ideas I have are a little bit different. They're things like, how can we support density in our neighbor's place? For example, bike lanes from Colwood, the gravel pit, to Whitty's Beach. So people have an opportunity to take those bike lanes out here. But the density we would see, and that is coming already in Royal Bay. It mentions here encouraged to work closely with adjacent First Nations, and I'm wondering about if we might reach out to Shannon and ask them if there are things that we could do together with them that would be of interest and help them, perhaps in housing or other issues. Is there support that we can provide to affordable housing in Langford? They've got a number of projects on the go, I believe, and is there something we could do there? I'm not trying to push back so forcefully to the provincial government. I'm just thinking about, if we spend this money, let's spend it in a way that meets the terms but declares some of our position about maintaining us as green space. So other things that I can think about would be as the population grows around us, are there things we need to do about hardening our trails, hardening our parks a little bit? I know it's been back and forth in previous council about whether washrooms, at some of our beach sites might be appropriate. They're costly. I know that. I'm just saying, is that the kind of thing that we can do that supports density, but not here in Metchosin so much? At one of our earlier meetings, Colin Sparks spoke about dividers on some of the roads for bicycle lanes. Again, an idea where we're seeing more traffic here in the ecotourism, that kind of thing, where people are coming out here. Is there something to be done there in terms of inviting our neighbors to be here in Metchosin? Think of bus shelters, the museums and attractive places. Are they planning an enlargement there? Is there a sense, again, for people coming here to visit, see those sorts of things? So I'm not declaring anything here. I'm just saying, gosh, I feel a bit of a conundrum here about the fund itself and then what we might do with it. I previously spoke about putting it to the fire hall, for heaven's sakes, if we're going in that direction. But the fire hall's a much bigger project and may or may not make sense in that frame.
We'll find out more from the feasibility study for sure for that.
Yeah.
And like you, I read some things about the housing and the increase in density. And what I have experienced just in, maybe not with housing, but certainly density of visitors that have come through Machosen during COVID, and the amount of use our trails have received, specifically one of the main ones that brings people in is the Galpagoose, because it connects other communities with us. And then the crosswalks, etc., and lights that Councillor F has been working on. So the continuum of roadside trails and safe passage for the visitors and people who actually do live here. And it all goes in with the other section of this, where it talks about climate action plan and the greenhouse gases. So that's also doing our part for the region as well. So that was, there's quite a few different things in here when you really start to dissect it.
Yeah, and I could add that, I mean, just to, so I'm not misinterpreting, the Vancouver Sun article today, Minister Callan is quoted as saying, all BC municipalities received no strings attached cash this spring through the Growing Communities Fund. So that's the language, but on the other hand, the letter itself is pretty clear. I took the calculations and I reverse engineered them. So what would the population growth need to be to get the $2.438 million? And it looks to me like, and I know Sue Lynn is on, or Mr. Nowski's on the telephone and will be able to run the numbers better than I can, but it looks like an increase of 478 population growth. I don't know over what period of time.
Mayor Little?
Okay, so I read that, but I also had conversations with our MLA, Mitzi Dean, and she clarified that this was pretty open-ended. They've got some guidelines here, as long as we account for it and meet all their guidelines and deadlines. They're fine with it, and it is open-ended, but there was three major objectives. So it was for the expansion of facilities. Certainly the fire hall would be in that. Also for feasibility studies, feasibility plan for the fire hall, feasibility for active transportation plan. Secondly, replacement of aging infrastructure. So the Weir Beach Stairs would fit in that. The Flesh Road Bridge would fit in that. And then thirdly, support for climate change adaptation and to help safeguard residents from the risks of extreme weather. So you can see it's pretty loose-ended, and we can be creative, and we can get more information from the province if we're worried about it. But I think on purpose they left it open-ended to some way. And you could interpret growing communities in different ways. So growing communities, growing a rural community in terms of supporting that rural community. And that's how I read it, and we can get more clarification back from the province, but certainly I did send the article today to everybody, the Vancouver Sun article. We are listed, and certainly we know we may be required, but we can cross that bridge, plan for it. But this is for mainly infrastructure. Yeah, thank you.
Just reading the last sentence of the first paragraph. Local government's investment in core community infrastructure amenities increases the amount of land that is ready to be developed to higher density. And then the principal objective is increase local housing supply. So I'm just saying, let's be thoughtful and creative, and as we're talking about, we don't need to decide them tonight or even next month. And we'll learn more, I think, both about this fund, and I really appreciate you having those words with Minister Dean, but also we can learn a lot more about the housing strategy. We got some pretty important information today in the last few days. It's making us all kind of lots to figure out at all of those things. I give you that.
Yeah, so lots of ideas. Councillor, do you have some comments?
Oh, I just had one thing I forgot on my list, and that was to replace the surface on the tennis court with as a multi-purpose sport court.
Yeah, that's the recreation. That's good. Yes.
I think I mentioned before, but maybe not to a greater audience, I did have a conversation with David Eby before he came Premier, but when he was sort of campaigning to become premier, and I did say that I was a councillor at the time representing a rural farming and a community with lots of green spaces. And we weren't interested in paving over Paradise for housing, but we were interested in supporting other communities to have higher densities so that we were looked upon as a carbon sink and green spaces. And he actually stopped me and he said, we're not talking about agricultural land. We understand food security and seed security. And so I think they get it. And our letter that we're planning on sending will be reminding them of their other priorities in their government as well.
Okay, so we've got lots of ideas to think about, and we'll be moving this on to the planning committee meeting, I suspect. Either the next one or maybe through the summer of public. Lots more discussion. Ms. Tarski, do you have any comments about the community grant?
Just that I would suggest that we come back probably later in the fall when we're reviewing our strategic plan priorities again, and we're taking into consideration all the comments that were heard today, and come back with more comprehensive list of possible projects and having that discussion in a comprehensive manner in conjunction with our strategic planning and budgeting as well.
Good idea. Thank you very much. Okay. So, any other discussion on this topic? Okay, so we'll move on to the next part of the agenda, which is I need a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Epp. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And the next meeting is the council meeting.